It had been one of those nights that felt like the beginning of something, but also the end of something else. The air in the room was thick, the kind of heaviness that lingers after something unspoken has been shared. I wasn't sure what to expect when I met him, but the truth was, I didn't know what I was doing that night. No plan, no clear intentions, just an overwhelming, unexplainable pull. His name was Ethan. I had known him for months through mutual friends, though we'd never gotten past small talk. Until one evening, when the world outside was dark and still, and the night wrapped itself around us like a blanket, we found ourselves alone at a party. The conversation was easy, the kind that flows effortlessly when you're talking to someone who sees the world the way you do. Quiet, introspective, almost a little jaded. He asked me questions about my life, things I hadn't realized I hadn't answered out loud in ages. And I gave him answers I didn't even know I had, responses that felt almost too personal, too true, like we were in some parallel space, connected in a way I hadn't anticipated. His smile made the walls I had built start to crumble, and I wasn't sure if that was good or bad. Somewhere between the clink of glasses and the sound of music playing in the background, I found myself leaving the party with him. The decision wasn't rushed. It felt inevitable, like the natural progression of the night. In the cool air, our conversation slowed, but there was something more intense now, a quiet tension that hummed between us. Neither of us spoke much as we walked to his apartment, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, a space filled with things neither of us knew how to say. When we entered his place, it felt unfamiliar and safe at the same time. I wasn't nervous, not really, but my heart beat faster than usual. The sound of his footsteps behind me seemed to echo in the space between us. We stood there for a moment, looking at each other in the dim light, unsure of where the lines were, or if they even existed at all. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low but not uncertain, as if he needed to make sure I was too. His gaze searched mine for any hesitation, but I knew that if I thought too long about it, I might back out. Instead, I kissed him. Slowly at first, tasting the sweetness of his lips, the softness that I hadn't expected from someone who seemed so grounded. And that was it. In the quiet, in the unspoken, the world outside stopped. There was no time, no past, no future, just the feeling of being present in that moment with him. I had never done this before. I had heard the stories of women who lost themselves in the act, who regretted it, who felt nothing but the emptiness afterward. But nothing about that night was like what I had imagined. With every movement, every touch, he was patient, steady, like he was waiting for something from me too. And in a way, I suppose he was. We both were. It wasn't just about sex, it was about connection, about trust, about allowing each other to be vulnerable in ways that words couldn't explain. When it was over, we lay there in the dark, neither of us saying anything for a while. My head rested on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath me. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel, but what I did feel was surprisingly calm. There was no shame, no guilt. Just a quiet sense of clarity, like something inside of me had shifted. "I'm glad we did this," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He didn't answer immediately, but I could feel his hand on my back, soft and reassuring. "Me too," he said finally, and I could hear the honesty in his voice. I closed my eyes, the weight of the moment settling in, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was liberating, almost. I wasn't defined by that night, or by him, or by what had happened, but I knew something had changed. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't just drifting, but truly living. The first time I slept with a man, what a strange thing to say. I didn't know what to expect, but I left that night feeling like I was finally awake, like I had stepped into the next chapter of myself, no longer afraid to face whatever might come next. And yet, even in the morning light, even as I sat there, alone with my thoughts, I felt no regret, no shame. Only the quiet realization that I had crossed a threshold, and whatever came next, I would be ready.